The universe had a peculiar way of serving up irony with a side of existential dread. Take, for instance, the prestigious Galactic Archaeological Society's latest expedition to the supposedly uninhabited deathworld they'd just discovered in the spiral arm of the Milky Way. Chief archaeologist Zexthyrix, a being composed primarily of crystalline structures and pure scientific enthusiasm, had expected to find nothing more than simple bacterial fossils. Instead, the team uncovered what could only be described as nature's greatest collection of murder machines. "This can't be right," Zexthyrix chittered, their crystalline form vibrating with disbelief as they examined the massive skull before them. According to these readings, this creature's bite force would have exceeded the crushing capacity of a Varaxian battlecruiser. The skull in question belonged to something the team would later learn was called a Tyrannosaurus rex, but at that moment it was simply specimen A113, and it was making the entire archaeological team question their career choices. Assistant researcher Blorp, a gelatinous mass of nervous energy and advanced degrees, oozed closer to the fossil. "Perhaps our equipment is malfunctioning. Surely no biological entity could evolve such efficient killing capabilities." The irony of their statement would become apparent later, but for now, the team continued their excavation, unaware they were about to uncover evidence of an entire planet's worth of evolutionary arms races. As the days passed, each new discovery proved more terrifying than the last. Saber-toothed cats with fangs that would make a drachnid warrior weep with envy, massive marine reptiles that could have swallowed their research vessel whole, flying creatures with wingspans wider than their shuttle. "This isn't a planet," declared Security Officer Crix, their tentacles wrapped protectively around their weapon. "This is a museum of nightmares." The real kicker came when they discovered these weren't even the most recent apex predators. Layer upon layer of fossils told stories of multiple extinction events, each wiping out one set of terrifying creatures only to be replaced by something equally nightmarish. "Well," Zexthyrix announced during their nightly report to the Galactic Council, "we've found evidence of at least 5 major extinction events. Each time, the planet basically hit the reset button on life, and each time it came back with something even more horrifying." The council members shifted uncomfortably in their gravity pods. "And you're certain nothing survived these events?" asked the High Counselor, hope evident in their electromagnetic pulses. That's when their communication system pinged with an incoming message from the planet's surface, from something calling itself Human Space Command. The archaeological team exchanged glances as the message played. "Greetings, visitors. We couldn't help but notice you're interested in our dinosaurs. Would you like a tour of our Natural History Museum? We have an excellent collection of prehistoric predators. The gift shop even sells plush T-Rexes." The silence that followed was broken only by Blorp's nervous gurgling and the sound of Crix dropping their weapon. "So," Zexthyrix said slowly, their crystalline form glowing with a mixture of fascination and horror, "not only did something survive on this death world, but it survived long enough to turn its predators into stuffed toys." The Council's collective response was a long, drawn-out series of clicks that roughly translated to, "Oh no." They had no idea that this was just the beginning of their crash course in Earth's evolutionary history. And somewhere, in a museum gift shop, a plush T-Rex waited to be sold to its first alien customer, its tiny arms extended in what might have been either a hug or a threat. With Earth's history, it was often hard to tell the difference. The first official meeting between the Galactic Archaeological Society and Earth's scientific community took place in what humans called the American Museum of Natural History. The choice of venue proved both enlightening and traumatic for the alien delegation. "Welcome to our humble collection," announced the lead paleontologist, gesturing toward a towering skeleton that made Security Officer Crix instinctively reach for their weapon. This is our Tyrannosaurus Rex haul. We're quite proud of it. Proud. They were proud of these monsters. The alien delegation exchanged worried glances as their human host continued the tour with all the enthusiasm of someone showing off their garden, not a gallery of prehistoric horror. Now, what's fascinating about T-Rex isn't just its size, the paleontologist continued, completely oblivious to Blorp's nervous quivering. It's the fact that it wasn't even the largest predator in Earth's history. That honor belongs to several marine creatures, like the Megalodon. The what Alodon? Zexthyrix asked, their crystalline form dimming slightly. The human's eyes lit up with an unsettling gleam. Oh, you'll love this. Follow me to the marine life exhibition. As they moved through the museum's halls, the alien delegation began to notice a disturbing pattern. Every time they thought they'd seen the apex of evolutionary violence, the humans would cheerfully introduce them to something worse. Here we have the Megalodon, the paleontologist announced, standing before a massive jaw reconstruction. Think of it as a great white shark, but bigger, much bigger. And what's a great white shark? Blorp bubbled nervously. The human pulled out something called a tablet and showed them footage of a modern shark breaching the water to catch a seal. Crix fainted. Literally fainted. Their tentacles went limp, and they had to be revived with smelling salts. Oh, don't worry, the paleontologist said, mistaking their horror for simple surprise. Modern sharks are much smaller. Well, mostly, and they rarely attack humans. Usually. The usually did not help. But let's move on to some of our other extinct predators. Have you heard about the short-faced bear? Imagine a grizzly bear, but taller, faster, and with a more efficient killing bite. We don't know what a grizzly bear is, Zexthyrix pointed out. Oh, right. Let me show you some footage of those too. By the time they finished watching videos of modern bears fishing for salmon and raiding campgrounds, Blorp had developed a new shade of nervous green nobody in the delegation had seen before. But wait, the human continued, their enthusiasm seemingly boundless. We haven't even gotten to the really interesting predators yet. Let me tell you about pack hunters like the dire wolves and the terror birds. What followed was a 2-hour lecture on pack hunting strategies, complete with computer simulations that would give nightmares to species that didn't even sleep. The human explained concepts like persistence hunting and cooperative strategy with the same casual tone someone might use to discuss their breakfast preferences. The fascinating thing about extinction events, the paleontologist explained while leading them to yet another hall of horrors, is how they shaped evolution. Each time a major predator group died out, it created opportunities for new predators to evolve and fill those niches. And nothing survived these events? Zexthyrix asked hopefully. Oh, plenty of things survived. That's how evolution works. The species that adapt survive. Take mammals, for example. After the dinosaurs died out, mammals evolved from small, rodent-like creatures into everything from wolves to whales. Wolves? Blorp asked, dreading the answer. Pack hunters, highly intelligent. They're still around today, though mostly as dogs now. Would you like to see my pet dog? I have pictures. The images of what the human called a golden retriever were somehow both adorable and terrifying, especially after learning these creatures descended from pack-hunting predators. But the most successful predators, the paleontologist continued, were obviously the ones who could adapt to any situation, use tools, and work together in large groups. The ones who could think ahead, plan, and modify their environment. And those would be? Zexthyrix asked, already knowing and dreading the answer. Us! The human beamed. Humans. We're not the strongest or the fastest, but we're really good at figuring out how to hunt things bigger and stronger than us. Would you like to see our anthropology exhibition? It has a wonderful display on early human hunting techniques. The delegation collectively decided they needed a break, preferably a long one. with strong drinks. During their recess, Zexthyrix compiled their notes while trying to make sense of what they'd learned. The planet wasn't just a death world, it was a death world that regularly upgraded its death machines. And somehow, through all of this, a species of relatively fragile bipeds had not only survived, but had become dominant enough to turn their planet's most terrifying predators into museum exhibits and plush toys. Perhaps, Blorp suggested hopefully, they're simply very good at preserving history. Maybe they're not actually predators themselves. That's when their human host returned, carrying something they called a lunchbox. Sorry for the delay. I was just grabbing a quick bite. Ham sandwich, you know, pig meat. We domesticated them thousands of years ago. Speaking of which, would you like to learn about how we transformed wolves into puppies? It's a fascinating example of selective breeding. The revelation that these humans routinely ate other species and had somehow convinced apex predators to become their companions was the final straw. Crix fainted again. "Oh dear," the human said, reaching for their communicator. "Should I call medical assistance? Our veterinarians are very experienced with all sorts of species." "Veterinarians?" Zexthyrix asked. "Yes, animal doctors. We've gotten quite good at treating all sorts of creatures. It started with our livestock and pets, but now we can help almost any species. Did you know we have doctors specialized in treating sharks? Speaking of which, would you like to visit our aquarium next? They're doing a feeding demonstration in the shark tank." The delegation decided that perhaps they'd learned enough about Earth's predators for one day, or one lifetime. As they prepared to leave, the human called out, "Wait! You haven't seen our special exhibition on prehistoric hunting techniques. We have demonstrations of spear throwing and atlatl use scheduled for this afternoon." Watching their visitors practically run back to their ship, the paleontologist shrugged and turned to a nearby security guard. "Was it something I said?" Meanwhile, in their hastily departing ship, the alien delegation was drafting their report to the Galactic Council. How exactly does one explain that they've discovered a species that not only survived multiple extinction events, but actually missed their planet's ancient super-predators enough to build entire buildings dedicated to displaying their remains? More importantly, how does one explain that this same species had somehow managed to make apex predators into companions, turned other species into food sources, and considered all of this completely normal? "Perhaps," Zexthyrix suggested as they broke orbit, "we should classify this planet as approach with extreme caution and leave it at that." "Agreed," Blorp burbled, still that new shade of nervous green. "Though perhaps we should add a note about their gift shops. The plush T-Rex was somewhat endearing." Crix, having finally regained consciousness, just whimpered and hugged their newly acquired stuffed dinosaur closer. As Earth shrunk behind them, they couldn't help but wonder, what kind of species survives in a world full of monsters by becoming something even the monsters would fear? And more importantly, who thought turning those monsters into cuddly toys was a good idea? The answer, of course, was humans. Always humans. And somehow that was the scariest part of all. The Galactic Council's subsequent investigation into modern Earth revealed something far more unsettling than ancient bones. As it turned out, humans hadn't just survived their planet's evolutionary arms race, they'd won it decisively. "Look at this footage," muttered senior investigator Quip, their antennae twitching in distress as they showed the council their findings. "They call this sports fishing." The video showed humans in tiny boats, deliberately antagonizing creatures larger than themselves, just for entertainment. Not for food, not for survival, for fun. "And this," Quip continued, switching to another recording, "is what they call wildlife photography." The council watched in horror as humans casually approached dangerous predators, armed with nothing but image-capturing devices, seemingly oblivious to their own mortality. Are they immune to fear? Asked one council member. Worse, Quip replied. They appear to actively seek out dangerous situations for what they term the thrill of it. The investigation revealed increasingly disturbing patterns. Humans didn't just coexist with dangerous creatures. They deliberately inserted themselves into hazardous ecosystems, often with minimal protection, for purposes ranging from scientific research to something they called extreme sports. A particularly troubling report came from an observation team stationed near something called a national park. The humans have established designated areas where they deliberately maintain populations of dangerous predators, the report stated. They then enter these areas for recreation, carrying only basic supplies in what they call backpacks. They refer to this activity as camping and consider it relaxing. The Council's collective bafflement only grew as they discovered humanity's relationship with their planet's remaining predators. They had somehow managed to turn wolves, pack-hunting apex predators, into creatures that helped them heal psychological trauma. They kept big cats in controlled environments for conservation. They studied shark behavior by climbing into cages and dropping themselves into the ocean. But perhaps most disturbing was humanity's casual dominance over their environment. They didn't just survive in various ecosystems, they modified them to suit their needs. They've created artificial weather in enclosed spaces, reported another investigator. They call them climate-controlled buildings. They've built structures that reach into the clouds. They've created synthetic materials that outperform natural ones. They've even started modifying the genetic codes of other species. The council chamber fell silent as they contemplated this information. These weren't the actions of prey species that had gotten lucky. These were the behaviors of something that had transcended the traditional predator-prey relationship entirely. There's more, Quip added hesitantly. We've discovered their entertainment media. The following presentation showed humans creating simulated experiences of encounters with extinct predators, apparently for amusement. They had entire entertainment complexes dedicated to recreating the experience of being hunted by prehistoric creatures. They miss them, one council member realized with horror. They actually miss having giant predators around. That's not the worst part, Quip continued. Look at how they've mythologized their ancient predators in their cultural narratives. They've created entire stories about bringing them back to life. And in most of these stories, the humans win. The evidence was undeniable. Humans hadn't just survived in a world of monsters. They'd become something that made those monsters obsolete. They were tool users who had turned their ability to modify their environment into an art form. They were pack hunters who had organized themselves into global societies. They were persistence predators who had developed the ability to track their prey across entire continents. A junior analyst timidly raised their appendage. I've been studying their historical records. Did you know they used to hunt creatures called mammoths by literally chasing them until they collapsed from exhaustion? They did what? Several council members asked simultaneously. Yes, they called it persistence hunting. They would just keep following their prey for days until it couldn't run anymore. They still practice similar techniques in some regions, though now it's usually for what they call marathon running. They just run for fun now, not to catch prey. The council chamber erupted in nervous chittering. The idea of a species that would chase prey until it gave up from sheer exhaustion was bad enough. The idea that they now did similar things for entertainment was somehow worse. So, summarized the High Counselor, we have discovered a species that evolved on a death world, survived multiple extinction events, turned apex predators into companions, considers hunting large creatures a leisure activity, deliberately maintains populations of dangerous animals for study and entertainment, and misses the prehistoric monsters that used to hunt them. Yes, Quip confirmed, and they're starting to look at space exploration. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of someone dropping their datapad. Perhaps, suggested one council member, we should reconsider our definition of apex predator. Agreed, said another. And maybe add a note to the galactic database. Warning, humans consider being chased by prehistoric monsters entertaining. As the council debated their next steps, somewhere on Earth, a human child was begging their parents for a pet reptile, blissfully unaware that they were carrying on their species' proud tradition of befriending things that other species would sensibly run away from. The really worrying part? The parents were probably going to say yes. The final meeting between the Galactic Council and Earth's representatives took place in what humans called the Smithsonian Institution. The Council had insisted on neutral ground. The humans had suggested a museum. Nobody was quite sure who had made the bigger diplomatic mistake. And here, the human ambassador said cheerfully, gesturing to a massive display, is our Hall of Human Origins. We've documented our entire evolutionary journey. The council members stared at the exhibit, which basically outlined how a species had gone from being small, vulnerable primates to becoming the planet's dominant life form in what was, evolutionarily speaking, the blink of an eye. Fascinating, isn't it? The ambassador continued. We weren't the strongest, fastest, or biggest, but we had these. They wiggled their opposable thumbs. And these, they tapped their forehead. Tools and planning. That's what changed everything. High Councillor Vex cleared all three of their throats. Yes, about that. We've been meaning to discuss your species' innovative approach to survival. Oh, you mean how we outlasted the megafauna? That's actually a bit controversial. Some say it was climate change, some say it was human hunting, probably a bit of both. You hunted them to extinction? Interrupted a council member, their bioluminescent spots flashing in alarm. Not intentionally. Well, mostly not intentionally. Look, we were just trying to survive, and then we got really good at hunting, and before we knew it, well, that's why we have conservation programs now. The humans had apparently decided that the best way to make up for accidentally hunting things to extinction was to become really, really good at keeping other things from going extinct. The irony was not lost on the council. But let's move on to something more cheerful, the ambassador suggested. Would you like to see our space exploration exhibit? We're particularly proud of how we solved the problem of surviving in environments that should technically kill us instantly. The council delegation followed, each member trying to process the fact that humans considered the void of space less challenging than their own planet's original ecosystem. We've been meaning to ask, Vex ventured carefully, about your species' apparent enthusiasm for dangerous situations. Oh, you mean extreme sports? Yeah, some people enjoy the adrenaline rush. Speaking of which, would you like to see our new virtual reality exhibition? It simulates being chased by a pack of velociraptors. Several council members had to be escorted to the meditation room after that suggestion. Perhaps, Vex suggested diplomatically, we could discuss your species' current role in your planet's ecosystem. Sure, we're basically the custodians now. We protect endangered species, maintain ecological balance, and occasionally have to remind ourselves not to accidentally make things go extinct again. Did you know we've actually brought several species back from the brink of extinction? We're getting pretty good at it. The council members exchanged glances. The humans had gone from being so good at hunting, they accidentally eliminated entire species, to being so good at preservation, they could reverse extinction trends. It was like they'd speedrun evolution, and then decided to start modding it. And what about your relationship with Earth's remaining predators? Another council member asked. Oh, that's one of our success stories. We've established protected areas for them, studied their behaviors, and even learned to coexist. Well, mostly. Sometimes we have to remind people not to try to pet the bears, or take selfies with moose, or feed the alligators. The fact that humans had to be actively discouraged from approaching dangerous predators said more about their species than any archaeological finding. As the tour concluded, the ambassador led them to one final exhibit, a massive display showing Earth's current biodiversity alongside representatives of extinct species. "You see," they explained, "we learned from our mistakes. We figured out that being the apex predator isn't just about being able to hunt everything. It's about being responsible for maintaining the balance. We're not just predators anymore, we're protectors too." The council delegation stood in silence, finally understanding what made humans truly dangerous. It wasn't that they'd survived in a world of monsters, or that they'd become better predators than their prehistoric competitors. It was that they'd transcended the entire concept of the predator-prey relationship and decided to rewrite the rules of survival. "One last question," Vex said. "Those plush prehistoric predators in your gift shop. Oh, aren't they cute? My kid collects them. Has the whole set, T-Rex, velociraptors, megalodons. They have this whole imaginary game where they're a prehistoric zookeeper." And there it was. The species that had outcompeted some of the most efficient killing machines evolution had ever produced, now made cuddly toys of them for their children. They'd turned the monsters of their past into educational tools and entertainment. As the council delegation prepared to leave Earth, they passed a school group entering the museum. The children were wearing paper dinosaur masks, roaring playfully at each other, supervised by adults who seemed completely unfazed by their young mimicking ancient apex predators. "You know what's really interesting?" the ambassador called after them. "We're starting to think some dinosaurs might have had feathers. Can you imagine? They might have been more like giant angry chickens than scaly monsters." The council members couldn't imagine. They didn't want to imagine. They had learned enough about Earth's evolutionary history to last several lifetimes. Back in their ship, Vex drafted their final report to the Galactic Council. "Earth status: approach with extreme caution. Current apex predator species has transcended traditional classification. They don't just survive, they adapt, protect, and occasionally turn deadly predators into plush toys. Most concerning of all, they think this is normal." In the ship's recreation area, several council members were hugging their newly acquired stuffed T-Rexes, trying to understand how something so terrifying had become something so cuddly. They had come looking for answers about what had killed Earth's ancient predators. Instead, they had found something far more fascinating, a species that had looked at the most efficient killing machines nature had ever produced and thought, "We can do better than that," and somehow they had.